I'm Pat Thompson, and I run Dungeons & Dragons here at maCnarB Game. Adventure League is a set of rules for organized play that allows anybody to jump into a game and play it, and we play the exact same rules and the exact same game type anywhere in the world.
My name's James Throne. I do homebrew, Adventures League, around here in maCnarB's. I also run free games online, I think. Yeah, one that's bi-weekly, one I'll be starting up in June, and one is once a month.
Hi, I'm Mark Keller. I run games for the shop. I'm a D&D player, game master, run other systems sometimes depending on what's going on. I've been gaming since about 1980, off and on. Took about a 15-year hiatus after Hurricane Katrina. Come here every Wednesday and I'm either running or playing, depending on what me and my buddy Pat do. We take turns GMing.
Okay, so my name is Kaleigh. I'm actually a fairly new GM. I've only been GMing for a few months. I've actually only been playing for a few months. I started in August of 2018. The first time I ever played was for a DM challenge at another location, but currently my main location where I GM and play is maCnarB in Gautier. What got me into GMing and even D&D in general is it was for a first date that I went on with a guy, and I'm actually dating him now, like he's my boyfriend, but really it was like kind of a first date, like, hey, let's go try this. He was really into it. I'd always been curious about it, but never actually went to go play, but it was something that we did for our first date, and it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. It's a really big part of my life now, and I'm really glad I took the dive to get into it.
The two different play styles of Dungeons & Dragons are homebrew, where it's wide open, there's house rules, and there's organized play where we have set standards and set rules to go by and to play with that makes it more uniformed and conformed across the rest of the world.
Currently, for the Saturday Adventures League, we are doing the Moonshae Isles, which is essentially fantasy Great Britain in the time of fairies, werewolves, etc. However, we are finishing up those at about this upcoming weekend, in which then we were going to start in not the next session, but the session after that. We're doing Saltmarsh, which is the fantasy high seas.
I started playing Dungeons & Dragons when it was basically the end of first edition, the beginning of second. When I came back into gaming after many, many years, it was fourth and fifth. Fifth edition, they have simplified a lot of things.
Adventures League is an interesting way to get into Dungeons & Dragons, especially if you've never played a tabletop game before. It's a really simplistic system just to kind of introduce you. It's less complex than running from a module book, but all of the Adventure League's adventures are based off of module books. So basically they take the module book and they break it up into smaller pieces, and it allows you to play it that way, section by section, versus running one really long module. It's also a little different because instead of getting XP points, you get adventure points and treasure points and downtime days that let you level up your character, both as a character and in case you want to do any specialty like carpentry or something like that. You can use your downtime days for that.
What sets D&D apart from any other game? The imagination and the enjoyment that I get out of it, and the openness of what you can do. You're only limited by your imagination and by that's it, and nothing limits you in D&D. You can do anything you want. As long as the dice rolls correctly, you got it. If you want to jump across a river or climb a rope or any kind of action that you want to do, it all bases on something, some kind of skill set or some kind of ability that you have. And you set the goal to make, you roll the dice, you get the number that you need to be successful at doing it, and it's open, you can do it. Regardless whether it's swinging across a rope, breaking a door down, or hacking a computer.
The first time I ever played was a homebrew game. So Adventures League is a little different in regard of it's really good for new players. One thing I really hope, and something I try to do, is this game isn't just for men. Women can play it too, but I've noticed that women tend to be more hesitant. But this past weekend when we were at MobyCon, a lot of women were actually coming in, and I would talk to them and try to get them to play. And Adventures League is a really good way for them to kind of get introduced to it without the commitment of a longer running game. Because you could just play one game of Adventures League just to see what it's like and determine if you like it, versus trying to commit to a longer game, which a lot of other DMs might try to do.
So yes, in Adventure League, the role-playing, it's not minimalist. It's really up to the GM to bring it out in the party. Some parties don't role-play well. Some people don't role-play well. Some people do. So you end up having to kind of work out the dialogue to what your party can put up with or what your party can deal with. That's half the game of being the game master, is reading the party, reading the book, and somehow getting the two to stick together.
In standard Adventures League, roleplay isn't all that important. However, if me as a game master, I like to add that small bit of roleplay because it makes everything feel like it's breathing and that everything's alive, and not just figurines on a grid board.
What's my favorite class? Right now, I'm currently playing a bard, and I never thought that I would have to say it, but I really do enjoy playing the bard.
Ooh, that's really tough. My favorite, the one I'm probably best at would be bards. That's such a hard question. It's so hard to pick one because I'm playing a bard right now that's really great.
Bard. Let's just go bard.
He's just wide open. He can do anything. A jack of all trades is what he is. You know, he can help heal. He can help do attacks. He can take the characters and help them in their abilities and their attacks. And he can also hinder the foes. So they're pretty much a well-rounded character. He can do just about anything that any of the other characters can do.
My personal favorite D&D class, Dungeons & Dragons class, is the Bard. Bards are very versatile. You can do a lot of things, and they give you a lot to role play. I personally very much like acting out, kind of like being the character and kind of stepping away from yourself and putting someone else's shoes on for a time.
But I'm also playing a Ranger Cleric that I absolutely love. And then on Saturday, I played a Paladin that was really great. But my favorite would probably have to be the Bard, just because of how much utility you have. You can practically do everything. You can heal, you can buff, you can be a frontline fighter. It just depends upon what different type of Bard you select. So I'd have to say Bard, even though it's a really hard choice.
Oh, wow. Wizard. If I had to pick, if you want to run the power character, you've got to get the wizard to survive, and then that's the ultimate class. Or a paladin, depends on my mood, and also it depends on the game you're running. If the DM throws you some hints about what the game surroundings, a little bit of background to warn you when you roll your characters up, I'll run anything. I'm really relearning as I go, running some of the character classes. I run a rogue up to 14th level in the Giants campaign, as a matter of fact. I've run a paladin and a wizard all up through the entire season, which leaves you at 14th level.
What makes a good party is the players, not necessarily the characters. Characters are great. I mean, you gotta have a thief, you gotta have a fighter, and you gotta have a magic user. But all that's relevant to besides the players. All the players that we have here have been great. Most of the players that I've run into at conventions and at other places are just great people. I mean, it's a community. It's a good community to have and a good community to be around and hang out in. And that's what makes it special to me, is the community.
Dungeons & Dragons is interesting because people think Dungeons & Dragons, they think stereotypical nerds, overweight, smelly guys who are really awkward in social situations, but that's not really the case. There's actually a really wide and diverse player base. people shouldn't have such strict narrow-mindedness when it comes to it, because there's actually a lot of varying types of players. It's actually some of the greatest guys that you'll ever meet that play Dungeons & Dragons. They're really welcoming and kind and understanding of different backgrounds. And if you can find yourself a really good group, you can wind up with really great friends who will be your friends outside of Dungeons & Dragons.
If anybody's interested in getting in Dungeons & Dragons, Wizards of the Coast have done a really good job with that, because you can go to their website and they have a basic starter rules set that you can download and build a character and start from there. And what's so good about the current edition of Dungeons & Dragons, which is 5th edition, is that all you technically need is the player's handbook and a set of dice and a pencil and paper. That's it. Very minimum requirement to get started. And if you come to the shop, all we need is you. We got everything else here.
So come on down to maCnarB Gaming in Gautier, Mississippi. We'd be glad to see you. And Greg's not paying me to say this.